Cristina Colugio, and today I'm going to present the self-efficacy beliefs of 3 Mexican cross-border high school students to learn English at a foreign country. This is a research I worked on with Dra. Griselda Murrieta Loyo and Dra. María del Rosario Reyes Cruz.
At schools, English lessons in Mexico are usually not challenging and they tend to be repetitive and easy. In public schools, more than in private schools, teachers show no interest in the English subject. Therefore, students tend to reach low levels of proficiency, lose interest in English, and get bored of it. In addition, the context does not give students the opportunities to practice real development of the language, and one would think that being Chetumal a border city to Belize, students will have many opportunities to speak with native speakers of English, but culturally there seems to be a rejection to the English variety spoken in Belize. As a result, English learners have no calibration and accuracy of their English level and tend to perceive the language as easy. We found there is a gap in the literature regarding cross-border students who commute to a foreign country on a daily basis. Additionally, no research has studied self-efficacy beliefs in Mexican cross-border English learners in Belize. Therefore, our objective is to explore the self-efficacy beliefs of young students who commute to an English-speaking country to study high school, as well as to identify whether the 4 sources of self-efficacy have influenced their beliefs. The importance of studying self-efficacy is because people's beliefs about their capabilities affect academic achievements, emotions, perseverance, and motivation to learn. These beliefs affect what they choose to do, how much effort they put, how long they will persevere when facing difficult tasks, whether they engage in self-debilitating or self-encouraging thought patterns, and the amount of stress and depression they experience in taxing situations. Low self-efficacy students tend to have self-doubts in their performance, therefore avoid taking difficult tasks, whereas high self-efficacy students view difficult tasks as something to be mastered rather than to be avoided. For the purpose of this study, we came up with 4 research questions, but since the study is still being carried out and due to the lack of time, today we'll only present the first 2. Why did these young learners decide to commute study high school in an English-speaking country, and what is the sense of self-efficacy of 3 young commuter learners to learn English at a foreign country? Theoretical framework. Self-efficacy is defined as one's self-beliefs in one's capacity to organize and execute the courses of action required to produce given attainments. In this research, self-efficacy is defined as these young language learners' beliefs in their capacity to organize and execute the actions they are required to do in order to learn English at a foreign country. The self-efficacy theory by Bandura is organized in different dimensions which will determine a person's expected outcomes, success or failure, and they can either increase or decrease depending on each person. The 3 dimensions are magnitude, strength, and generality. Magnitude refers to the level of difficulty of a task an individual believes he or she is capable of performing. It can have its limitations and vary in each person. Strength refers to the individual's determination concerning his or her perceived capabilities to complete the task. And generality is the extent to which some past experiences, either success or failure, may influence on the individual's perception of mastering a specific task. There are 4 sources of self-efficacy. First, mastery experience. This is the most influential source of self-efficacy. It involves all the personal experiences an individual has had, successes and failures regarding the action or activity performed. Vicarious experience is watching similar people to oneself succeed in performances by sustained effort, and they can help a person compare his or her own competence with the individual's. Therefore, they develop a high or low sense of self-efficacy. The greater the assumed similarity to the model, the more persuasive the model's outcomes are. And verbal persuasion. This involves all the encouraging or discouraging comments and opinions about one's capabilities received from others. Where there is more credibility of a person given the persuasion, there will be a greater influence on one's beliefs of his own capabilities. Lastly, emotional and physiological states. These emotional and physical states such as anxiety and stress that a person might experience when performing a specific task. This depends on the individual, that is to say, how he or she interprets and deals with this. Method. We employed a qualitative case study design, and the participants were selected by purpose of sampling. The instruments were semi-structured interviews and drawings in addition to their descriptions. Interviews and descriptions of the drawings were transcribed, and parents were asked for permission through a consent form in which the objective of investigation was explained. The context. The research took place in Chetumal, Quintana Roo, at the participants' homes. However, their high school was in Corozal, Belize. These participants crossed the Mexico-Belize border daily to go to school in Corozal. Corozal is a small town in Belize. It is the closest city to the Mexican border, and its official language and language of instruction at schools is the standard version of English. The participants of this research are 2 female and 1 male, around the ages of 10 to 16 years old. 2 of the participants are siblings. None of the participants speaks English or any other language aside from Spanish, which is their mother tongue, and the participants have studied English at a basic level in their previous schools and had very basic understanding of the language when they began to study in Belize. Also, all of them had studied at private schools in the capital city of the state. For the literature review, 3 sections were selected. First, we reviewed studies that regarded self-efficacy in secondary school EFL learners to get a better understanding of the self-efficacy sense in these young participants. The majority of the studies were of quantitative design, and the most relevant findings are that high self-efficacy learners obtain higher English achievement, employ learning strategies, and adapt better to new environments. Also, a high self-efficacy level influences performance, effort expenditure, and interest in learning. The second section involves all the literature that we found in regard to the influence of sources of self-efficacy in learning English as EFL. Again, the majority of the designs were quantitative, and the relevant findings for each source are that an active mastery experience is the most influential source. However, in some studies, it is also possible to find high levels of self-efficacy despite not having these mastery experiences. As for verbal persuasion, students tend to receive more verbal persuasion from their teachers than from their parents or peers. It is also possible to find that in some studies, vicarious experience is the higher source of self-efficacy. In some cases, physiological states demonstrated to have more influence on learners' performance and also in their willingness to make a greater effort to achieve better performance. Given the lack of studies regarding self-efficacy in cross-border students who commute to a foreign country on a daily basis to study English, the third section of our literature review consists of studies regarding self-efficacy to learn English in a foreign country based on study abroad programs of short and long term. The majority of the studies were mostly quantitative and mixed method designs. It was found that study abroad experience strengthens and increases self-efficacy despite the length of a program, and also that students with a broad experience have a higher level of self-efficacy than those without experience, and an increase in oral skills such as listening and speaking. In addition, the extent of self-efficacy gains was found to be associated with the extent and type of interaction with members of a host country, and that students with previous stronger self-efficacy beliefs choose to study abroad for longer periods of time. Analysis and interpretation. For the first research question, which is why did these young learners decide to commute to study high school in an English-speaking country, we found that 3 factors influenced their decision. First, their own desires to engage in new activities by learning English. Secondly, their parents' interest in giving them better opportunities in the future. And thirdly, their disappointment with the English classes in Mexico. As for their own desire to engage in new activities by learning English, these students seem to have internalized external motives and transformed them into an identified regulation, which Desi and Ryan explain that occurs when people engage in an activity because they highly value and identify with a behavior and see its usefulness. These students are willing to get new opportunities in life when learning English will allow them to reach their goals, such as getting a job, traveling to other countries, or being able to understand information from the internet. In this sense, the participants mention, antes veía videos de una serie y los veía en español y luego empecé a verlos en inglés y me gustó la pronunciación y decidí aprender inglés. Ernesto mention, para que tenga mejores oportunidades y poder irme a otra escuela en otro lugar, mejores oportunidades en trabajo y eso, y puedo tener una beca para ir a Estados Unidos. For the second factor, which is their parents' interest in giving them better opportunities in the future, we found that the participants were highly motivated to learn English due to different aspects related to their parents. For instance, they're all educated persons, have median socioeconomic status, and have always positively advised them to learn English. In this sense, one of the participants mentioned, pues porque mi papá me empezó a decir así como que porque allí es mejor la escuela y porque iba a aprender inglés. This motivation of the students could be explained by Desi and Ryan's external regulation, which they explain comes from external sources. Further, Strong mentions that parents can play an important role in that when they encourage, persuade, and complement the ability of the students for doing a task, they help them increase self-efficacy levels. These findings coincide with those of Butler and Fallon Williams. Butler found that higher socioeconomic status parents' abilities to provide their children with greater opportunities to use English outside of the school are increasingly advantageous for the children's development of self-determined motivations. Additionally, Fenn and Williams found that parental advice positively predicts students' academic self-efficacy in English. As for the third factor, their disappointment with the English classes in Mexico, it could be due to two reasons: the difficulty of the task and the lack of quality of the English lessons in Mexico. In this sense, the participants mentioned, porque a veces en México siento las clases demasiado aburridas, porque siempre era lo mismo, todas las escuelas enseñan en español y es demasiado aburrido escuchar explicaciones. Y other participant mentioned, que los maestros no se toman, la escuela no se toma mucho en serio en inglés, y pues como que la maestra no habla inglés, habla en español. In this regard, our participants may have wrongly interpreted the difficulty of the activities they did in their English classes in Mexico, given the ease of the task, which led them to think that learning English was easy. In this regard, Ventura states that when a person might not identify the difficulty of a task, they tend to underestimate it. The lack of quality of English classes in Mexico. For these students, their English classes were repetitive, boring, and not challenging. In this sense, Lengelin elaborates that the quality of the curricula and the teaching in Mexico was and is very poor. She says the students are exposed to the same basic contents, that teachers are poor speakers of English and lack any English language teaching credentials. The second research question was, what is the sense of self-efficacy of 3 young commuter learners to learn English at a foreign country? We found that our participants' sense of self-efficacy changed over time. First, they started with a high sense of self-efficacy, but soon realized that their English level was not as high as they had thought. As they began their first trimester, their sense of self-efficacy decreased moderately because they faced the real difficulties and challenges of the language. The problems were mainly related to the use of English, not that much regarding the content, except for subjects such as religion studies. By the end of the school year, and due to different factors, they managed to recover their high sense of self-efficacy. Their changes in their sense of self-efficacy to learn English are presented in this line. First, while studying in Mexico, the students possess a high sense of self-efficacy. Then, at the beginning of the third trimester in Belize, their sense of self-efficacy was medium, and by the beginning of the second trimester in Belize, their sense of self-efficacy was medium-high again. and by the end of the semester, they finish with a high sense of self-efficacy. While studying in Mexico, students possess a high-level sense of self-efficacy because they perceive the English lessons as easy and they weren't very demanding. Therefore, they didn't have to put much effort, and they also lacked the real opportunities to perceive the difficulty of learning English. In this sense, Bandura mentions that self-efficacy is influenced by the difficulty of a task, the amount of effort they put, and the circumstances under which they perform. The participants mentioned, pues sacaba más o menos así como 8 o 9. Another participant mentioned that on a scale of 1 to 10, being 10 the most capable and 1 the least capable to learn English, she felt like 10. And the other participant mentioned that she felt capable of learning English with a 9. By the beginning of the first trimester in Belize, the students possessed a medium sense of self-efficacy. There was a decreasement in their sense of self-efficacy because the participants were faced with the real challenges and difficulties of the English language and began to perceive the language as more difficult than before. The context stopped being favorable to obtain good academic grades and was now forcing them to have real experiences using the 4 linguistic skills. In addition, the participants explained that they put into practice different learning strategies to enhance the English learning process. These findings coincide with those of Wang and Pape, who found that children with high self-efficacy reported more self-regulated learning strategies and achieved more success in learning English than the children with lower self-efficacy. In this sense, the students mentioned, tengo que prestar atención y ver cómo la maestra lo hace para que ya se me quede. Primero empecé preguntándole a uno de mis tíos, que no sé exactamente qué fue lo que estudió, pero sabe mucho de matemáticas y sabe técnicas para hacer ecuaciones, y luego comencé a ver tutoriales en YouTube. At the beginning of the second trimester in Belize, their sense of self-efficacy increased to a medium-high level, and the participants expressed to have had help from their teachers in the regular classes and support from their private lesson teachers who were native speakers of English. Also, having friends who helped them in tasks that were difficult for them in this new experience helped them through the process. Their parents always encouraged them with positive and comments and support as well. In this sense, the participants mentioned, pues mi maestra de inglés, pues ella sí me ayudó bastante, como que mis papás me han ayudado, pues la maestra también a veces. Antes de entrar me ayudaba, aunque ahora ya no necesito tanta ayuda y pues que mis amigos del salón también me han ayudado. Another participant mentioned, mi maestro me corrige y si no estamos en las clases de inglés tengo compañeros que me corrigen, pues que me ayudan porque si no estaría hablando mal el inglés y no me serviría de nada tratar de practicarlo. Mi maestro conmigo practica el spell y mi mamá me dijo que si le echaba ganas sí podía lograrlo. The participants had positive attitudes and willingness to take risks. This sense of self-efficacy, in addition to their perceptions of their improvements in using and understanding the language, helped them to gradually increase their sense of self-efficacy. In this sense, Bandura mentions that a person with a high level of self-efficacy in a responsive environment will be successful. Their positive attitude toward their abilities, coupled with environmental change, promotes success and improves long-term motivation. In this sense, the participants mentioned, yo pues porque tengo esta actitud de querer, porque si no quisiera pues no podría hacer nada. And one of the participants, Valeria, had positive attitudes toward engaging in new activities. She participated in a school contest to play the guitar in front of people that she didn't know when she didn't manage the language, and she did well. By the end of the semester in Belize, students possess a high sense of self-efficacy. Given that students have improved in their English skills, they felt capable and confident in their capacity to learn the language. Therefore, they put more effort into their tasks. In this regard, Bandura points out that the stronger the perceived self-efficacy, the more active the efforts. Thus, this confirms that these students strongly believe in their capacities to learn English, so they try hard because they knew they could make it. In this sense, the participants mentioned, pues no podía hacer las tareas porque estaba en inglés y yo no le entendía nada y ahora sí puedo hacerlas. Valeria mentions she feels 10 out of 10 capable to learn English now. At the beginning of a school year, she felt like 9. Also, 2 of the participants show preference for learning content in English. This could be explained, as Herrera mentioned in her research on content-based instruction for language learning. They came to feel that learning language through content enabled them to practice language in a meaningful way. This made both language and content more interesting and meaningful, that is, students who see that the English language had an actual use and tangible benefits. They mention, porque siento que se me quedan más las cosas si las estudio en inglés que cuando las estudiaba en español. And the other participants said, yo creo que sí avancé más porque ya me expreso más en inglés, se me facilita más expresarme en inglés que en español. As additional findings, we found that participants agreed on perceiving the writing skill as the least advanced skill in the second trimester and the speaking skill as the more advanced one. Also, the 3 participants agreed on preferring school lessons in Belize rather than in Mexico. Conclusions. We can conclude that motivation might be a high predictor of success in learning English among students who study abroad, that studying abroad strengthens the student's self-efficacy despite the short length of the stay, that a high motivation may be related to students' positive emotions and physical states, which in turn influence their sense of self-efficacy, and that despite the lack of inactive mastery experiences, the participants had a high self-efficacy level, mostly influenced by emotional states and verbal persuasion. Pedagogical implications and limitations. English teachers at public and private schools should be aware of the fact that their classes may not fulfill students' needs regarding the learning of English. Also, that their classes may contribute to create a false idea of what learning a foreign language requires. As for limitations, we had few participants, and there were more female than male. It would be better to have more participants and of varied ages, perhaps older students, to get more data and identify if they had the same results. Other instruments to collect data, because interviews with young people tend to be difficult since they don't express much or tend to give short answers. It would be a good option to add journals or observations in order to collect more data. And lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic. Due to the pandemic, data collection was delayed, and also the participants had returned to high school in Mexico. Therefore, now we will continue investigating if their sense of self-efficacy has decreased, increased, or maintained.